It's Friday. This is Toronto Sports Rush. I'm Kyle. That's CJ. CJ, the Los Angeles Dodgers just left Toronto. They took 2 of 3 from the Jays. The Jays looked terrible on Monday. They were
Mm.
able to win the last game of the series. We know the Dodgers are an excellent baseball team, one of the best there is. We know the Blue Jays won the ALCS last year. What can we take away from a series this early on? Or is it really just not that relevant given the injuries to the Jays, given the strength of the Dodgers? What's the takeaway here?
I will tell you for the players, it always matters, right? Regardless of what's going on with your team, even when you're missing some significant pieces and you're playing a team as good as the Dodgers, and even though it's early, there is a measurement there against yourself. They know who they are, but how about when you're down a little bit? Who are you? I think winning that last game was really important, right? The idea of the Dodgers sweeping the Blue Jays early on, kind of kicking you when you're down, that can have some carryover. That's the one you have to be careful about. And so the fact that they were able to pull that last one out, I think, is really important. I think the other thing that wasn't fortunate for the Blue Jays is that the Dodgers early on, their biggest bats were not swinging the bat particularly well, and then they started getting going, and then of course that really first big game where they put up what was it, 14 runs, and they kind of started getting going offensively, and we know what a juggernaut they can be even without Mookie Betts when they're right. But I do think you take something away from that last win. You don't want to roll over and get swept. It was unfortunate what happened with the first two. It was unfortunate that Max Scherzer had to leave a game dealing with some forearm stuff. I know it just kind of keeps adding up here right now in Toronto, but take something away from the win. Even though you lost the series, a sweep feels a lot worse.
Yeah, if you're only going to win 1 of 3, it's the last game of the series you
Yeah.
want to take with you. And the thing is, I spoke to Keegan Matheson about this yesterday, but this Jays team is now in a position they haven't been in a number of years where the optically the product they present to the public now matters because they're spending all this money and they need to keep people in seats and they need to keep selling merchandise. And as you say, for the players to care, it's easy to write off an early series season series loss, but the product they present night in and night out with all these teams gunning for them being the
Mm.
ALCS defending champions, it just sort of changes the tone of a 162 game season where there just aren't off nights anymore.
You're right, and especially the way the division is built, right? I think that's a big part of this as well, right? There are certain teams, we'll look at, say, like the Detroit Tigers who are struggling right now, who had a big offseason that, well, there's a little bit of panic there. You also feel like you'll have a chance to catch up in your division because it doesn't run nearly as deep as things run in the American League East. And the Yankees got off to a good start, then, of course, end up losing to the A's the way that they did here in their last series. So
Yeah.
that helps a little bit for sure. Ultimately, it is about you, but I think it's a fair point because we know what happens in Toronto with this fan base. They will get behind your team, just show us that you're in it and you're serious. The organization has done that. You get off to a slow start. You're hoping that everyone is still sticking around and getting behind your guys. It's up to the rest, right? I mean, it's kind of a tired thing that we say, but the reality is it is next man up. And as your depth gets tested here early on, it's up to those guys that are in uniform. To keep everybody engaged and into it. They have put a good roster together. There's no getting around what the Toronto Blue Jays front office did this past winter, including making sure their manager and John Schneider was going to be around. You hate going through lulls early, right? Lulls early always look bad because you're under 500. You're looking up in the standings, but you're still within 3 games. You're still within 3 games early. Those lulls are going to happen again later this season, too. They're not going to be nearly as noticeable, though, because it's not the beginning of the season, and hopefully they're not going to be under 500. So it is up to the group that's there right now in uniform. There's still some really good players who aren't hurt that have gotten off to slow starts, right? It doesn't look good when you look up at the scoreboard and some of your favorite Jays are coming to the plate and you're seeing some ugly
Yeah.
numbers right now. That's part of it, right? You sit there and maybe
Yeah.
that's the one game you're going to. And you're like, man, what a great year last year. How are we doing this year? And you're like, oh, well, that guy's not doing so great, and that guy's not doing so great. And do we have a problem? And maybe you're not coming back to another game for a couple of months, for some fans. So it does kind of get that spirit in there that you got to be a little bit careful about. But this is still a good team. They're just going through injuries right now. They need the guys that are filling in to be able to get it done for them.
So I want to hear your thoughts on Dylan Cease's performance the other day. And something very specific that I'm referring to here is that he had a very, very tough first inning where a lot of his old issues with control
Mm.
came back from the past. And this was a topic of off-season discussion, whether or not he could reel those in. But it seemed like he went into the dugout between the first and second inning, something was corrected in that he found more of that control and he was able to recapture the pitcher that they believed they were getting, and he was able to hold on to that game, which they, obviously a much different outcome. But that first inning was ugly and he didn't seem to have the ability in the past to reel that back in, and he did. What changes for a pitcher that allows that to happen moving from one team to another?
So it's one of two things, right? It's either mechanical or it's mental. And I would think in the case of Dylan Cease, as long as he's been around, it's probably something mechanical that they noticed, right? And this is what really good pitching coaches have the ability to do. For the longest time, you had to do it with your eyeballs. Now you can get a little bit of data feedback as well and get a feel for something that might be going on, whether it's an arm angle, whether it's extension, whether it's something with a front hip or a front shoulder that is opening up. You're right. We kind of knew that this was coming to some degree with Dylan Cease because this is who he has been. What's interesting to me, there's a stat that you can get focused on, at least I do sometimes when I'm calling games, and it's not just the strike rate, but it's the in zone rate. Like how many of your pitches, what percentage of your pitches are actual strikes? If you get chase, it's going to show up as a strike, but it's not an actual strike, right? And so that number in the big leagues is usually about 1 percentage point below 50. It's around 49%. So it's kind of fascinating to see that your average big league pitcher actually throws a little bit less than half of his pitches in the zone. Dylan Cease so far has been in the 30s. And that's not who he has been throughout his career. So that is a little bit of a concern. His three starts have been 36, 37, and 39% of those pitches have actually been in the strike zone. He's usually in like the mid 40s again, which is still below league average, but that's kind of who he is. He can get ahead. He can count on chase. He's going to throw a lot of pitches. Those three combined for me are a little bit concerning that he hasn't been in the zone a little bit more. So he made the adjustment when he had to. He was able to salvage the 5 innings, even though the pitch count got really high. But bigger picture with him, for me, and he's really good. Obviously, you don't give him that kind of contract if he's not. He's not taking my advice, but he's got to get in the zone a little bit more. The in zone rate has got to come up a little bit so you can get some more of that chase with his other stuff.
Yeah, it's a great note. Like obviously, a major league pitcher is not intending to throw a strike at every pitch. A lot of pitches you want to start in the strike zone and have them fall out, but those numbers are low, and it needs to be
Mm.
corrected. There's a lot of adjustment going on. He's probably feeling a lot of pressure with all of the injuries, and given those injuries, now the Jays have gone in and gone out and signed Patrick Corbin, who gets a start immediately tonight because, frankly, they have no other choice. What can they expect from this guy?
This guy's a gamer, man. You go back
Yeah.
and you kind of look at his history. If you dug in, he's a basketball player who, when he was in high school, like baseball wasn't even on his radar. And he told us a
Mhm.
story one time years ago. I was talking to him about showing up to baseball tryouts in a pair of jeans. So you got to instantly love this guy from that standpoint. And then he turns into a guy who makes well over 9 figures. He signed that big contract with the Nationals, and it just did not go well. But what you notice there is that he took the ball every single time while he was absolutely getting it handed to him. Then he had a nice little bounce back last year for the Texas Rangers, became a serviceable guy that helped out at certain points in the season. That's what you're banking on, right? Can he help out right now? The reality is he's probably not going to be in your rotation the rest of the year. In a way, you kind of hope it. That means everybody's coming back
Right.
and you're getting deeper again, and he kind of gets pushed out. But he is a guy that you can count on to kind of step up. He is an upstate New York kind of guy, so he's closer probably to Toronto where he grew up than actual New York City. So I'm guessing he has a little affection for the club. But I like him. I've always liked him. I've always respected him. He's a lefty that knows how to get guys out. Again, he's going to take the ball, and if he's having that bad day, he's going to stay in there and absolutely wear it and get as deep as he can. I know you don't want to see that, but just kind of speaks to the personality of who he is. We talked about this last time. We were wondering about Lucas Giolito. The concern is always kind of what you were doing leading up to this. I don't doubt that he was staying in shape and throwing, but
Right.
there is something about the importance of spring training as it's a necessary evil. It always feels like it goes too long. But you need it. You need those live at bats. You need those innings. You need those ups and downs with some kind of adrenaline, even though spring training doesn't give you a lot. That would be my only concern with him. But not surprised that he says, I'm ready. He's going to step up and he's going to make this start for the Jays.
What are your thoughts on the drama with, I mean, it's really kind of George Springer and Shohei Ohtani, but really it's the Jays and the Dodgers and the amount of
Hmm.
time it takes Shohei to get back out to the mound when he's both pitching and hitting. I'm a little torn on this issue because it's one thing to bend the rules for one guy, but the guy is a unicorn and he is good for
Yeah.
baseball. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I think Dave Roberts said something that was really important in that, even though he was upset, and that was, I understand why. Right? If he was on the other side, Dave Roberts, I thought was being pretty fair about it and say, I get
Yes.
why that would bug the other team as well. I'm not in favor of changing the rules. Like you are doing something that is really special. Well, if you're going to do something that's really special, do it in the confines of how we have the game set up. We all love Shohei Ohtani and who he is and what he means to the game. Well, maybe we all don't love him, but you know what I'm talking about. Like we respect what
Yeah.
he does and who he is. But I'm not in favor of that. Like if you want to do something special, then stay within the rules and get going. Listen, Major League Baseball pushes so hard to keep the games moving. The fact that they've even introduced ABS, knowing it was going to be on average 14 seconds per challenge, adding about a minute to the game, like that means something to them. That's important to them that it's not much more than that. We've seen what's happened with the pitch clock and how they've kept the time of game down and the pace of game and what we've done with mound visits and throws over to first base. So we're not slowing down the game. If he were to do that, I get it's not going to happen every time. But if that were to happen 5 or 6 innings, you're adding some time on right now. That's part of the challenge of what Shohei Ohtani is doing. That if you're left on second base and the inning ends, you got your 205 or whatever it is to get your butt in there and get back out and get ready. That's your challenge that comes along with this. So I'm not in favor of giving anybody any extra amount of time. This is the challenge that you've taken on. The Dodgers already get to carry an extra pitcher in their bullpen because of him, right? It's the Shohei Ohtani rule. As a two-way player, they get to have 14 pitchers on their staff. Everybody else has to have 13. And so from that standpoint, they've already have an advantage. They don't need any more. I get that it's challenging. Nobody wants to see him get hurt, but stay within the rules.
Out of curiosity, do you know, has this issue occurred when I mean it's one thing when he's either on base or the inning ends with him at the plate because that takes more time. Has this issue occurred when he's just in the dugout? He's in fourth up and he doesn't get up. Like, is
Yeah.
this for all the time? Because I get you're taking off your elbow armor and this and that, but you could also have people run out on the field to retrieve those. So he just stands on the mound and wait for that stuff to be delivered to him. The Dodgers could certainly accommodate that.
Yeah, they could. I don't mind him going back in to get a quick drink. If that's
Yeah,
what you want,
sure.
like you leg out a double or whatever it might be. You're right. You could do it like you do with every other fielder, right? An outfielder ends up
Exactly.
making a last out, then you bring him his stuff, and he goes to the mound. Why does he get to stop? Why does he get to rest? Why does he get to have a drink? Nobody else really does. Now, if you want to have, say, a bat boy that's in charge of that, I think that's perfectly fair. I've said a lot that just in general, like for mound visits, I never understand why a pitching coach doesn't bring a bottle of water with him. You see it in every other sport, right? I mean,
Sure.
every other sport it happens. You have a timeout if they go out to the field in football, you're getting a drink, or you're coming back to the sideline, you're grabbing a drink. But we don't do it in baseball. And it's not as bad in Toronto because you have the roof. But go to a place where it's really warm. Come to Atlanta in
Arizona, yeah,
August and you're
yeah,
grinding, right? Bring
yeah.
that guy a bottle of water. So you could do the same thing in between innings. And I guarantee you there's, 30 plus catchers and I guess call it 60, right? You got two on each team around the league saying, nobody's slowing down an inning for me. When I end up on second base, I got to come back. I got to put all my gear on. I got to get back out there and I got to do it in time. They're not stopping the clock for me. Why are we stopping it for him?
Have you gotten the sense that any of the Jays superstars have been pressing early in the season, trying to compensate for the sheer depth of injuries that they've suffered so far?
I don't think so. And the thing that you look for in particular, two things that the Jays have always done well, but it's keeping the chase rate down and it's the strikeout rate, right? The strikeout rate is still in a really good spot for them. So
Yeah.
they're putting the ball in play. They're not swinging, missing. It's always been their identity. You could kind of go up and down maybe a little bit with some guys like Ernie Clement right now is chasing pretty badly. He's in the 40%. You're going to have like two or three hitters a year. That are in 40% chase rate area, with your league average being usually in the mid 20s. So you might look at that and say, is he pressing a little bit? Obviously, he had the huge offseason last year. We know how the huge postseason. We know how the offseason went, which basically meant he was going to get more playing time. They didn't bring Bo back, didn't have another, middle or right side of the infielder added to the roster. So it meant he was going to get the bulk of the playing time. So it could be some of that maybe here and there, but overall, no. I think there's again things that you look into: contact rates, strikeout rates, chase rates, that give you a little bit of a feel which guys are pressing, which guys are getting out of their game, trying to make too much happen.
From a pitcher's point of view, but I mean, also his bat is a big part of it too. Describe the depth of the loss of losing starting all star catcher Alejandro Kirk, because it does seem as though, his two backups, they're both switch hitting catchers. They can both
Mm.
hit a little bit, they can both play a little bit, but there's a huge piece of this team, both its heart and soul, and its literal on field performance now missing with Kirk being out for, I think, 6 weeks in total, they're saying.
These are the hardest guys to replace by far for exactly some of the reasons that you laid out there. It's not just what you're bringing to the table talent wise, right? You lose Vladdy, and certainly he's got personality, but you're losing significant big time talent. But he's really only affecting the offensive defense a little bit. But when you're talking about the guy that is involved with every single pitch of the game when he is out there, then the offensive side and everything else that catchers deal with, right? They're blocking, they're throwing, they're pitch calling. Now they're dealing with ABS. They're very, very difficult to replace. There's no getting around it. Now, I think it helps that your backup, who now becomes your starter in Heineman, has been there, right? And I know you guys have talked to him. We've talked to him. You hear him talk in interviews. Like he is solid. it's the kind of backup you want to have, but there's no replacing Alejandro Kirk. So at least the existing relationships are there. There's going to be some confidence throwing to him. If you had brought in, say, a new backup, kind of like we have here in Atlanta right now, and Jonah Heim's kind of been that guy, and Drake Baldwin's your lead guy, that would be problematic, right? Then now you're like asking him to catch 5 or 6 times a week. So at least you have the backup that has been there, that understands these guys, that understands tendencies. But there is no replacing him. There's no getting around it, and who he is, the quality of the at bats that he brings to the table. But there's always a little bit something more there, and you kind of have to be that guy. Quite honestly, as a catcher, you can't be a laid back personality who doesn't take on a leadership role when you're catching. You are thrust into that, and certain guys thrive in it and do it really well, and the team relies on it. Alejandro Kirk is absolutely one of those guys. Now he still gets to be around, which helps, right?
Sure.
If he's going to be in the dugout and talking to guys or having conversations with pitchers and Heineman, right? These could, you might see some in-game conversations where it's Tyler Heineman, it's Alejandro Kirk, and whoever's on the mound at the time and what they're seeing. So you'll still get some of that, but nothing replaces when he actually has the gear on his behind the plate.
All right, CJ, before I let you go here, I want to just, it's early on, it's 2 weeks into the season. What are some surprise? Oh, hold on a second. I nearly forgot to ask you about some. I nearly forgot to
Almost.
ask you about something because you were present for a brawl in a
Yeah.
game early on in the season. What was that moment like? Because it really slow brewed, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it just went bananas. It was very exciting TV. It spread all over the internet. I almost forgot to ask you. You were present for that. Please tell me what the first-hand experience like that was like.
Yeah, it was a good one for sure, and I've been to a couple of them in my career. There was one in 2000 where I think we set a record with 16 suspensions and like 22 fines. It was wild. It was benches cleared 3 times. It's on the internet. The Tigers and the White Sox back in 2000. But this was I say a good one. You don't want to see anybody fighting, but you know what happens in a lot of baseball, quote unquote brawls, is that not a lot of punches get thrown, if any. There's a lot of running around. There's a lot of pushing, but there's separation, and then everything is fine. So for Ronaldo Lopez, who was on the mound for the Braves facing Soler, they had been teammates the previous year or 2 years ago when Soler was back in
Mhm.
Atlanta. He had owned him. The batting average was up over 600. He had just hit his fifth home run against him in his career. He had crushed him. And then he ended up getting hit in his second at bat. Now, he did not get hit on purpose. It was a two-strike pitch that ended up hitting him. But I understand why you might take offense to it. Ronaldo started seeing some velocity tick up as the game was going on, started seeing some 96s and some 97s, but he also looked like he was overthrowing. He clearly overthrew a pitch that was up. It wasn't really up and in, maybe in or third, but it was high. It was really high, so much so that it got past the catcher and Jonah Heim. Soler took offense to that. There was a play that was going on that we wondered was whether or not the Braves were going to challenge it. Because basically what happened on that overthrow is the runner went to second base and Nolan Shonowell, and we wondered, oh, it looked like the tag might have happened. Are we going to replay? Including Jonah Heim, the catcher, who was looking in the dugout. All of a sudden, a stare down happens between Lopez and Soler. And it was just one of those things, man, right? Where I think the ego got the better of both of them and said, well, if you're going to stare at me, like, what's up? And as soon as the hands went up, off they went. There was some pretty decent contact. There's always funny things that happen in there. Like Ronaldo Lopez had his glove on and still had the baseball in his hand when he punched Soler. There were infielders running in that still had their gloves on. It just always looked kind of funny, like drop the glove and go separate. The highlight, of course, was Walt Weiss, the manager of the Atlanta Braves, who is trained in MMA. He's a black belt in Taekwondo. He knows Soler well. Like, he cares about him. And Walt's just been fantastic, but he did a really nice job of a lower body takedown. Dustin Garneau, who's our catching instructor, did not get the credit he deserves. He went, basically, it was almost like they planned it out, which they didn't, where Walt went high, Walt went low, Dustin went high. And dove on top of Soler and were able to neutralize him. Nobody got hurt, which was really important. Again, Walt is such a good guy, has such a good relationship with Soler. He was able to talk to him, calm him down. Everybody said the right thing, I think, afterwards. But it got heated, and it could have got a lot worse. Both guys got suspended. Ultimately, for Lopez, his suspension got dropped down to 5 games, so he's only going to get pushed back a day. He's not going to miss a start. That's good news here in Atlanta, but it was a wild one. I mean, energy was high. I think the good news also was that it didn't spill over. Like, you have some of these brawls and it happens where benches clear, maybe some punches are thrown, and it stays intense. It stays intense the rest of that game. It carries over to the next day. You're always wondering, is somebody else going to get hit? None of that existed in this one, which I think ultimately was a good thing. But yeah, it was a fun moment, and it's fun to call, and it's instant adrenaline even for those in the booth.
It sounds like the Braves coaching staff could hop on Interstate 75 on Saturday and drive down to UFC 327 in Miami because it's maybe they can squeeze both in. I've also never seen a player use the baseball as if he'd
Yeah.
just gone crab fishing and wanted to eat immediately, trying to crack the shell open. It was a move. I don't
It
know if
was.
he like was about to throw it and then thought better of it and just held onto the ball, but it made for very compelling John Boy content. I'll say that much. Before I let you go, CJ, any pleasant or perhaps negative surprises from around the league you've observed in the first 2 weeks?
So I think that listen, the start the Yankees got off to, obviously it got slowed down here a
Ugh,
little bit after losing their last two. I know you don't want to hear it, but that's been a big
nah,
one. The
it's is what it
Marlins right
is.
now tied for first place in the National League East has been a little bit of a surprise. And if you start looking around the league at some of the bigger contracts that were signed this offseason, whether they were extensions or whether they were free agent contracts, there's a lot of guys that are scuffling. Right now, it's still early, but like I talked about with the Jays, scuffling early always sticks out like a sore thumb. So there's been some of that going on, and as a former player, you always hope that fans will remain calm. But again, you look up at the scoreboard, you see some ugly numbers. So that's been a little bit of a surprise to see some struggles, to see the Mariners struggling the way that they are. I know it
Yeah.
doesn't break the hearts of Blue Jays fans, but that has been somewhat of a surprise. Mentioned the Tigers as well. It is very, very early. But yeah, there's definitely been some really good storylines of expectations we did not have going into the year.
All right, CJ, thank you very much. We'll be talking to you soon here on Toronto Sports Rush.
Sounds good, Kyle.